The galaxy was wide, full of shining fleets and mighty empires, yet drifting on the outer rim was a warship no one cared about. Its name was Resolute. To most, it was only a relic, a tired piece of metal from an older war. Its hull bore scars, long scratches from forgotten battles. Some called it a floating grave, others called it scrap. Even among humans, few gave it respect. They had newer ships now, more powerful and faster. Why look at an old vessel that seemed ready to break at any moment? But Resolute was not empty. It still lived. Inside, 200 men and women kept its heart beating. They walked the halls where the lights flickered and the engines groaned, but they walked with pride. For them, the ship was not just steel and wires. It was history. It was memory. It was a reminder that humanity had fought with tooth and nail. When no one believed they could survive, Captain Alara Voss had commanded Resolute for 5 years. She was not famous. Her name was not spoken in the council halls or celebrated in grand songs. She was quiet, steady, and often overlooked, just as her ship was. Yet she carried a calm strength. She never demanded glory. She simply asked her crew to stand with her, and they did. The galaxy, however, laughed. The other empires looked at Resolute and saw weakness. To them, the humans were still children, new to the stars, stumbling through technology that others had mastered for centuries. A ship like Resolute was proof of their foolishness. An antique, the Dravari Dominion once mocked. Hardly worth aiming at, said a Vehlari admiral. Perhaps good for a museum, sneered the Zelth coalition. The word spread, reaching even human allies who shook their heads in pity. The Galactic Council, filled with countless species, no longer took humanity seriously. They whispered behind closed doors that humans had rushed too fast into the void. But the crew of Resolute knew the truth. They remembered Earth's history. They remembered that humanity had been underestimated many times before. In ancient times, they had been seen as weak tribes with no chance against empires. Yet humanity always survived, always adapted, always found a way to fight back. That spirit burned within them still, carried by every officer, every engineer, every pilot aboard Resolute. The ship itself was old, yes, but it was not ordinary. Its hull was rebuilt many times, layered with metals no alien could name. Its engines, though loud and slow, were reforged by human engineers who cared not for beauty, but for endurance. Every weapon was adjusted, every cannon tested, every missile launcher carefully oiled. Resolute was no showpiece. It was a survivor, just like the people who lived on it. Still, outside, the mockery never ended. Whenever the warship passed through trade routes or stations, other crews laughed. Some even saluted as if it were a joke, saying, "Ah, the mighty Resolute, protector of the stars." The younger crew members sometimes clenched their fists, angry at the insults. But Captain Voss never allowed anger to rule them. She always said the same words in her calm, steady tone. Let them laugh. Ships do not need applause. They need only purpose. Her words stayed with them. They worked harder. They trained longer. They believed in their ship, even if no one else did. Far beyond their knowledge, storms were forming. The Dominion's fleets were growing restless, and war was whispering at the edges of human colonies. Soon the galaxy would see fire again, and when the storm came, the forgotten warship would no longer remain in shadows. The Resolute, mocked and ignored, would rise, and those who laughed would learn what it meant to underestimate humanity. For now the ship drifted quietly, a shadow among stars, but within it beat 200 human hearts, steady and unyielding. And in silence, they prepared. The galaxy was never quiet for long. Empires rose, empires fell, and greed never slept. Among them, one empire was feared more than most, the Dravari Dominion. The Dravari were tall, scaled warriors, their bodies built for battle, and their minds sharpened for conquest. For generations, they had expanded, crushing weaker civilizations and bending them into slaves. They were not builders, they were not dreamers. They were predators, and the stars were their hunting grounds. When whispers spread that the Dominion's fleets were moving toward human colonies, Fear began to ripple across the Galactic Council. Meetings stretched for days. Leaders argued. Yet when the subject of humanity came forward, most alien voices carried the same tone. Mockery. Humans? Sneered a Valari elder, her thin hands folded with false pity. The Dravari will not even need their full force. A single fleet will break them. Another delegate chuckled. Perhaps the humans should send their Resolute. That relic might confuse the Dravari long enough for their civilians to escape. Laughter filled the council chamber. To them it was a joke. Humanity was too young, too fragile. Their fleets were small, their technology rough compared to the sleek and shining ships of the galaxy's older races. In their eyes, humanity's defeat was not a question of if, but when. Even some humans at the council sat in silence, unable to answer the ridicule. They wanted to argue, but deep inside, doubt gnawed at them too. The Dominion was a storm, and humanity seemed like a fragile hut standing in its path. Far from the council halls on the edge of human space, the old warship Resolute received new orders. It was to act as a forward patrol, a first line of defense against any sudden Dominion push. When the crew heard the orders, there was no cheer. There was no trembling either. Just silence, heavy and steady. They understood what it meant. They knew the council had sent them there not because of trust, but because no one else cared if Resolute was lost. On the bridge, Captain Alara Voss studied the star map. Her hands rested behind her back as she looked at the glowing lines of human colonies, the fragile chain of worlds that would stand between the Dominion and Earth. Her second-in-command, Commander Hale, stepped beside her. He was younger, fiery, in spirit, always ready with a sharp word. "They've thrown us like bait," he said bitterly. "The Council hopes we buy them time. They don't expect us to survive." Ilara did not answer at once. Her face remained calm, her eyes fixed on the map. Then, slowly, she spoke. "Then we must survive longer than they think. Resolute has never been about pride, Hale. It has always been about duty." He looked at her, searching for doubt in her eyes, but there was none. The crew went about their work, but whispers spread among them too. They knew the Dominion was coming. They had heard the stories of their fleets, armadas, that darkened skies, weapons that burned planets. Some were afraid, of course. Fear was human. But beneath the fear was something else. Resolve. They had been mocked, ignored, even insulted by the very council they were sworn to protect. Now, if the Dominion came, Resolute would stand not just for Earth but for the honor of all humanity. And in the far distance the storm began to move. The first Dravari fleet, 50 ships strong, broke into human space. It was only a taste of their power, a test of resistance. But even a test was larger than most human fleets could handle. Their commander sneered at the thought of conquest. 50 ships are more than enough, he growled. We will crush them before they even scream. Their target was clear, the colonies nearest to the rim, and the only warship standing in their path was Resolute. For the first time, the forgotten ship would face the fire. For the first time, the galaxy would watch. And for the first time, the humans would have a chance to prove that laughter could turn to silence. The storm was coming, and the old ship was waiting. The Dominion fleet entered human space like a shadow of death. 50 massive ships cut through the dark, their armored hulls glowing with cruel light. To the Dravari, this was no real battle. It was sport, a test to see how quickly humanity would break. At the very edge of their path, waiting silently, the black floated Resolute. The old warship looked small compared to the Dominion vessels. Its scarred hull seemed fragile. Its engines rumbled instead of humming like the sleek alien ships. To the Dravari, it must have looked pathetic. On the bridge, Captain Alara Voss stood tall. Her face was calm, her hands resting behind her back. Around her, the crew moved with quiet focus. No one shouted, no one panicked. They had trained for this moment even if no one else believed in them. "Contact confirmed," said Lieutenant Mara, the sensor officer. Her voice was steady, though her fingers trembled slightly on the controls. 50 ships, Dominion design. They're spreading out. A silence fell across the bridge. 50 ships against one. The numbers felt like a death sentence. Commander, Hale gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. They must think we'll run. They probably don't even see us as worth firing at. Ilara's eyes did not leave the stars ahead. Then let us remind them that underestimating humans has never ended well. The Dominion commander sent a message across the void. His image appeared on the bridge screen, a towering figure of scales and armor, his eyes full of arrogance. "This is your defense?" he sneered. His voice was thick, filled with mockery. "One broken warship? Humans truly are the weakest of the young races. We expected at least a fleet, not a grave ship ready to fall apart." Laughter echoed from the Dominion. Officers around him. They saw no danger, only a joke. Ilara did not answer his mockery. She simply gave a nod to her crew. The communication screen went dark. "Battle stations," she said softly. The crew moved without hesitation. Cannons armed. Missile bays opened. Shields rose. Every system groaned under the strain, but the ship answered like it. Always did. With loyalty. The Dominion opened fire first. Bright lances of plasma streaked through space, crossing the distance in blinding flashes. The first shots hammered Resolute's hull, shaking the ship violently. Sparks flew across the bridge. Alarms screamed. But the old warship held. Its reinforced armor absorbed the fire better than anyone had expected. "Shields holding," Mara reported, her voice louder now to rise above the alarms. "Minimal damage," Hale grinned. "Minimal damage from that? They'll be choking on their pride soon enough." "Return fire," Ilara ordered. Resolute's guns came alive. They did not fire elegant beams of energy like alien ships. Instead, they spat out pure metal. Kinetic slugs accelerated to unimaginable speeds. The galaxy had long abandoned such weapons, believing them crude and outdated. But when those slugs struck the first Dominion ship, the result was devastating. Enemies' energy shields built to counter plasma and lasers flared uselessly. The raw force of physics ignored them. A single slug tore straight through one warship's core, and in a silent explosion, the vessel split apart. Cheers erupted across the Resolute's bridge. One kill. The impossible had just become reality. Target. "The next!" Hale shouted, his eyes blazing. The Dominion ships adjusted quickly, swarming like wolves. Plasma fire rained down, each blast shaking the human ship harder. Fires erupted on lower decks and damage reports streamed in, yet Resolute fought back with relentless fury. Second slug fired. Another Dominion ship burst apart. Third slug fired. A cruiser spun out of control, torn open like paper. The enemy commander's laughter was gone now. His voice barked sharp orders. Across their comms, rage burning in his words. "Destroy that ship! Burn it to ashes!" But the old warship danced. Its engines strained, pushing harder than they had in years, twisting between enemy fire. Its size, once mocked, became its strength. Too small to pin down, too fast in sudden bursts, too stubborn to fall. Hours passed, the void filled with fire and wreckage. One by one, the mighty Dominion warships fell. 50 had come. 40, 30, 20, until silence began to spread across the battlefield. At last, the final Dominion vessel exploded, its fragments drifting into the dark. The stars were quiet again. On the bridge, smoke hung in the air, consoles sparked, and exhausted crew members slumped in their seats. But they were alive. Against all odds, they had stood. Ilara looked at the ruined enemy fleet on the screen. Her voice was calm, but her eyes shone with fierce light. Let the galaxy laugh now. The forgotten warship had done the impossible. Alone, it had destroyed 50 ships of the Dominion, and the whispers of mockery that once haunted humanity were about to turn into whispers of fear. The wreckage of 50 Dominion ships floated across the stars, burning silently in the void. The old warship Resolute drifted among them, scarred but alive. Its hull was blackened, its engines limping, and smoke filled many of its corridors. Yet against all odds, it had stood. The crew moved through the damaged halls, some bandaged, some bleeding but none broken. Engineers dragged cables, patched holes, and fought to keep systems alive. Medics carried the wounded gently, whispering comfort, even as exhaustion pulled at their own strength. On the bridge, Captain Alara Voss sat in her chair, her uniform torn at the shoulder, her face pale from the long fight, but her eyes still burned with fire. "Status report," she said softly. Lieutenant Mara checked the consoles, coughing through the smoke. Hull breaches sealed. Shields at 20%. Weapons, half operational, Captain. Engines damaged, but stable. We can still move. Commander Hale gave a crooked smile, leaning against the rail. His hair was matted with sweat and blood, but his voice carried pride. "Half a ship is more than enough. We just destroyed 50 of theirs." Murmur of laughter rippled across the exhausted crew. It was not loud, but it carried warmth. The galaxy was already buzzing. News of the impossible victory spread faster than light. Across colonies and stations, humans lifted their heads with new pride. The Galactic Council, once filled with laughter at humanity's expense, now sat in silence. Even they could not deny what had happened, but the Dominion did not take humiliation lightly. In their war halls, the scaled commanders slammed their claws against stone tables, their voices echoing in fury. 50 ships lost to one? To humans. It was unthinkable. It was shameful. And shame was something the Dominion never forgave. "Send the Armada," their overlord growled. His voice was a low hiss, promising blood. "Erase them. Leave no trace of this insult." The order went out. Hundreds of ships began to gather. The storm that had once been a whisper was now a roaring wave. Back aboard Resolute, the crew knew what was coming. They had intercepted fragments of Dominion transmissions. The next strike would not be a small fleet. It would be the full fury of the enemy. In the mess hall, silence hung heavy. Men and women sat with tired eyes, pushing food around their plates more than eating it. The victory had lifted their spirits, but the thought of what was next weighed on them. One young ensign finally spoke, his voice trembling. "How do we fight hundreds? We barely survived 50. No one answered at first. Fear was there in every heart. But then Commander Hale stood, his hand resting on the table. "Listen," he said, his voice firm. "They think we should be afraid. They think we should run, but this ship is still here. We are still here, and if we fall, then we'll fall as humans always have, fighting until the last breath. I'd rather die standing in this ship than live bowing to the Dominion." The room grew quiet. Then, slowly, heads lifted. Fear was still there, but alongside it came something stronger. Resolve. Captain Alara entered then, her voice calm as always. "Prepare yourselves. The next battle will be harder. Some of us may not live to see the end, but hear me well. We will not be forgotten. When the galaxy speaks of this war, they will remember us." The crew rose to their feet. "No," one shouted, no one cheered. Instead, they nodded silently, the weight of their duty heavy on their shoulders. Far away, beyond human space, the Dominion Armada began its march. Hundreds of ships lit the void, their engines blazing like a tide of fire. On the edge of the colonies, the battered Resolute waited, old, scarred, and mocked by many, but unbroken. Its crew knew what was coming, and they were ready to meet it. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The storm was about to break. The Dominion Armada came like a burning wave across the void. Hundreds of warships filled the darkness, their massive hulls glowing with cruel fire. Their formation stretched so far that stars vanished behind them. To the Dominion, this was not just war, it was revenge. At the edge of human space, the old warship Resolute waited. Its hull was still scarred from the first battle. Its systems were patched with makeshift repairs. The crew was weary, but their eyes held no fear now. They had seen what their ship could do. They had seen the arrogance of the Dominion shatter once before. And though the enemy now came with greater numbers, the fire within them had only grown stronger. On the bridge, Captain Alara Voss stood in silence, staring at the approaching storm. Around her, the crew moved with quiet determination. "They've brought everything," Commander Hale muttered, shaking his head. "This isn't a fleet. It's an Empire's hammer. They mean to smash us to dust." Ilara's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Then we will show them that dust can cut stone." The crew exchanged looks. Some smiled faintly. Some clenched their fists. All of them knew she meant every word. The Dominion hailed them once more. Their commander appeared on the screen, his scaled face twisted with hatred. "You got lucky once," he hissed. "But luck dies. Today your kind ends. Your ship will burn, your crew will scream, and your colonies will kneel before the Dominion." Ilara did not flinch. Her answer was simple. "We will never kneel." The connection cut. The battle began. The Armada opened fire with a storm of plasma and energy. The void lit up with thousands of burning lances, all aimed at a single target, Resolute. The old ship shuddered under the onslaught. Alarms wailed. Hull plates glowed red. Entire deck shook as if the ship itself cried in pain. "Shields at 15%, Mara shouted. "We can't take this for long." "Hold steady," Ilara said. Resolute answered with fire of its own. Its cannons roared, slinging slugs of metal into the enemy ranks. Each shot tore holes where energy weapons could not. Dominion ships burst apart in explosions of fire and shattered steel, but there were so many of them. For every ship destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. The void was thick with enemies, and their fire never stopped. On the lower decks, engineers worked frantically to keep power flowing. Sparks rained from broken wires. The air was hot with smoke. Yet hands kept working, patching systems with whatever scraps they could find. In the med bay, wounded crew members lay on stretchers. Some whispered encouragement to those still fighting. Some held hands, refusing to let go even in pain. There was fear, yes, but above it all was pride. They were part of Resolute. They were part of something greater now. Back on the bridge, Commander Hale slammed a fist against the console. "There's too many. We can't fight them all." Ilara turned her eyes to him. Her face was calm, but her words cut through the chaos. "We don't need to fight them all. We only need to fight long enough to show them who we are." Her hand hovered over the command panel. Deep inside the ship, hidden from even the Council's knowledge, was humanity's last secret. The experimental weapon, the one the galaxy had never seen, the one that could turn the tide. She looked at her crew, faces battered, eyes weary, yet every one of them waiting for her word. "Prepare the singularity lance," Ilara ordered. The crew froze for a heartbeat, then obeyed. Systems groaned as power was rerouted. Lights flickered. The ship trembled as if it feared what was about to be unleashed. The Dominion pressed closer, tightening their net, eager to crush the small ship once and for all. Ilara's voice was steady, almost a whisper. "If this is our end, let it be an end they will never forget." And with that, the old warship aimed its hidden weapon at the heart of the Armada. The storm had met its match. The Dominion Armada closed in, their ships surrounding Resolute like a steel cage. Hundreds of cannons aimed at the single human warship. The void glowed with plasma fire, and every hit shook the vessel to its core. Inside, the ship groaned like a wounded beast, but it did not fall. The crew held their posts with white-knuckled hands, their eyes fixed on their captain. Singularity lance charged at 70%, Lieutenant Mara reported, sweat running down her face. The console sparked in front of her, but she did not move. "Hold," Ilara Voss said quietly. Her voice cut through the smoke and alarms, steady as stone. The Dominion commander sneered from his flagship. "Why do you resist? Why do you cling to hope? Humanity is nothing. Your ship is a relic. Die with dignity." But Resolute did not answer with words. It answered with fire. "Lance charged," Mara called. Her voice trembled now. 100%. Ilara nodded once. Fire. The stars screamed. From the heart of Resolute, the Singularity Lance unleashed its power. A beam of compressed gravity tore across the void, bending light itself. It struck the Dominion Armada with unstoppable force. In an instant, 3 battleships vanished, crushed into nothingness. Their twisted remains scattered like dust. Smaller ships collapsed as if an invisible hand had crushed them. Space itself rippled, warping under the weapon's fury. The bridge fell silent. Even the crew who had prepared for this stared in awe. They had unleashed something more terrifying than any weapon humanity had ever built. On the enemy flagship, chaos broke out. Orders shouted, panic rising. For the first time, the Dominion saw fear in their own eyes, but the cost was heavy. Lights across Resolute flickered out. Consoles died. The engines groaned and stuttered. Systems failing, Hale shouted. That shot nearly tore us apart. Alara gripped her chair. Her voice was calm, but her face was pale. Then we make every shot count. Recharging will take time, Mara said quickly. We can't fire again yet. The Dominion seized the chance. Their ships swarmed forward, unleashing a storm of plasma and energy. The Resolute shook violently. A console exploded, throwing a crewman to the floor. Fire spread along the bridge wall. Shields collapsing. Deck 4 is gone. The medbay has been hit. Voices poured in, but the crew did not abandon their posts. Even as flames licked at their uniforms, even as smoke filled their lungs, they fought. Every hand on board worked like part of one great machine, human will refusing to break. The old cannons fired again, punching holes in Dominion ships that came too close. Missile bays spat fire, shredding enemy cruisers. The ship twisted and turned, battered but unyielding. Hours passed. The battle was endless. For every Dominion ship destroyed, more pressed in, but Resolute refused to fall. At last, the lance recharged. Alara's eyes burned with determination. Target their flagship. The crew obeyed. The Dominion commander roared orders, but too late. Fire. The second blast ripped across the stars. The enemy flagship screamed, its hull folding inward, collapsing into itself before bursting into nothing. The commander's voice was silenced forever. For a moment, the Armada faltered. Their leader was gone. Fear spread like a shadow through their ranks, but the battle was not yet over. Resolute was bleeding. Fires raged across its decks. Hull plates were torn open. Life support systems were failing. The crew was exhausted, every breath a struggle. Still, they fought on. On the bridge, Alara's voice broke through the chaos once more. We are not the strongest, we are not the oldest, but we endure. And while we endure, humanity will never fall. The crew answered with one final push, their hands steady despite the shaking decks. They were ready to face the storm until the very end. The Dominion had brought an Armada, but humanity had brought something greater. They had brought the Resolute, and the storm was breaking. Silence returned to the stars. The Dominion Armada, once a roaring tide of fire and steel, was no more. Wreckage floated like frozen flames in the void, drifting quietly in the black. And in the center of it all, battered and scorched, drifted Resolute. The warship had survived. Its hull was riddled with scars, its engines weak and sputtering, and smoke curled from multiple sections. Yet it floated proudly, a testament to human endurance. Its crew was exhausted, bloodied, burned, bruised. But none had surrendered. The bridge, Captain Alara Voss leaned heavily against the command chair. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes were alive with quiet fire. She looked out at the void, where remnants of the enemy ships glimmered like broken stars. We did it, whispered Mara, her voice hoarse. Alara turned to her crew, all of them staring at her, some slumped in their seats, others gripping consoles as if holding themselves upright. We did not do it for glory, she said softly. We did it because we must. Humanity never survives by giving up. We endure. That is what makes us human. Commander Hale wiped blood from his brow and smiled faintly. They mocked us, they laughed at us, and they tried to crush us. And yet here we are. The crew nodded, a quiet pride filling the air. It was not triumph shouted in celebration. It was the kind of pride born from survival, from standing tall when every hand in the galaxy pointed at you and said you would fail. Far across the void, news of the battle spread. Human colonies lifted their heads. Allies and enemies alike paused, stunned at what had happened. The Galactic Council, which had once laughed at humanity's ships, now watched in silence. Their doubts had been shattered, and the Dominion, their empire, had been humiliated. Leaders who had sneered at humanity now trembled, realizing that the small, seemingly fragile species was not to be underestimated. Resolute had shown them the hard truth. The human spirit could never be measured by the size of its fleets. Below the bridge, engineers patched the last breaches. Medics tended to the wounded, offering quiet words of comfort and encouragement. Smoke cleared slowly from corridors. The ship groaned, but it lived. Its systems hummed once more, stubbornly refusing to die, just like the humans aboard. Elara finally leaned back in her chair, exhaustion heavy in her bones. "We were not the strongest," she said, her voice soft, almost to herself. "We were not the fastest, nor the most advanced, but we were human, and humans endure. That is why the galaxy will remember this day." The crew looked at her, and in their eyes, she saw the reflection of their own determination. They had fought together, laughed in the face of fear, and held fast when everything seemed lost. "Captain," Hale said quietly, "do you think they'll ever forget us?" Elara smiled faintly, a tired but proud smile. "No, not now, not ever. This ship, our crew, it will become legend, the warship that none took seriously, until it annihilated an armada." Somewhere deep in the hull, the ship itself seemed to sigh. The fires were gone. The alarms were quiet. For the first time in days, Resolute drifted through the stars peacefully. Yet it was not at rest, it was alive, carrying the hearts and courage of every human aboard. Outside, the stars shone brighter than ever. Perhaps they had always been bright. Perhaps humanity had finally earned the right to be seen among them. The Resolute had survived when no one believed it could. The crew had survived when no one believed they could. And in doing so, they had sent a message to the galaxy. Underestimate humanity at your peril. Captain Voss stood one last time on the bridge. "We are human," she said. "And while we endure, no power in the stars can ever truly defeat us." The crew nodded silently, their spirits renewed. Outside, the wreckage of the Armada glimmered like shattered diamonds. And in the center, floating proudly, was a ship that had carried 1,000 hopes, 1,000 fears, and 1,000 hearts. Resolute, the ship that could not die, and the galaxy would never forget it.